The DIESOL podcast.
Digital integration in English as a second or other language.
Episode 50. Reflections.
Welcome to DIESOL. This is episode 50. Yeah, we are your hosts. I am Brent Warner.
And I'm Michelle Reyes. Episode 50.
Huzzah! We made it.
Huzzah! Yahoo! Hooray! What else do people say?
Bonsai.
Congrats. Bonsai.
Yeah, it's a pretty big milestone, 50, right?
Yeah, and we
How
increased
did you feel
our
when
episode.
you turned 50?
What? How did I feel when I hit over the hill? Or what are we at the peak of the hill?
You're over the hill at 40, right? So now it's just downhill from there.
Whose hill?
Are you not familiar with this?
No.
Being over the hill?
Over the hill is 50 or 60.
The new generation has redefined.
What kind of limiting beliefs do you have, Brent?
It's not a limiting belief. It's just it's an expression. You say you're over the hill at 40.
We're changing these. These are like old idioms.
Okay. So what's the new hill? You get over the hill and now there's a mountain behind that, right? Got it. 50 episodes. 50 episodes is a pretty big deal, right?
It is. It is a big deal.
Statistically speaking, very unlikely for podcasts to get to 50 episodes.
I did not know that.
Yeah, they're like 10. Most podcasts fail before 10. So we're like five times out.
One thing I'm pretty proud of is that we've mostly been able to coordinate. I mean, this really kind of has started since I moved from California. Mm-hmm. So given the circumstances and the challenges that we have with time zones and different schedule conflicts, we've pretty much made it to 50.
Yeah. Well, and we've been consistent too. So we've always gotten that first and third week. So I don't think we've ever had any well, this is not true for Drinks with DIESOL, but like for the other things, we for the proper episodes, I don't think we've missed a launch date the entire time.
No, I think that's right. With just the Drinks with DIESOL has been the one where it's really a bonus episode. Yeah. But no, we've done pretty well, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Esol. Good job.
Congratulations, Brent.
Yeah. So let's. So thinking of 50 episodes and all of that, we are going to be talking about some reflections. So let's jump over and see what reflecting means. All right. So reflecting, reflections, and
have your mirror ready.
Yes. You're good enough. You're smart enough. Gosh darn it, people like you. So we thought we'd maybe do things a little bit different. We're still going to kind of keep some of the structure where we're talking a little bit about some research on brief research on reflections, but then I think we're going to go into like a little therapy session, Michelle. I think that's the plan for the episode, right?
Oh gosh, we need therapy, especially second year of pandemic.
Yes, indeed.
Bring it on.
All right, so let's have you start. What did you find?
So I looked at an article that you provided, Brent. It was Learning Thoughtful Reflection in Teacher Education by Luigina Mortari. I hope I pronounced that correctly. If not, forgive me. And this is a 2021 article. And a quote that grabbed me is a little bit long, but I think there's value in reading it out, the whole thing. So here goes. Professional expertise should be conceived of as the ability to construct experiential knowledge on the basis of a reflection on experience. A necessary condition for the creation of experiential professional knowledge is the activation by the subject of the mental discipline of reflection on his or her experience. This reflection should be continuous and regular through time. To this end, practitioners need to be given preparatory experiences specifically aimed at increasing their reflective capacities so that they can learn to think not only about what they are doing, but also about what they are thinking. If reflection plays a crucial role in improving professional expertise for teachers, and if reflection is not a natural ability but also has to be enhanced through education, it is clear that educating to practice reflection must be a main topic for teacher education.
Yeah.
So, a lot of what this quote talks about is mirrors exactly what I talk about in a lot of our episodes on evaluation and self-reflection and assessment and growth and all of that. So I just thought, what a good time for us to reflect on our growth as, in many areas, of course, as podcasters and also as professional development providers and as teachers.
Yeah. Well, so reading through that and kind of hearing you speak the quote too, part of our selfish value of the podcast is that we are reflecting on what we're actually doing in the classroom every day. So we're able to take these ideas and either put them into practice, or we're able to try something and then bring it back onto the show to reflect on. And so I think doing this show allows us for so much more reflection than maybe a lot of other people might get. And of course, we hope that, anyone who's listening along is also doing that same practice with us, whether they're listening and getting ideas and trying it and then thinking about it, or if they have tried something and then listen to us talking about it on the show and, agreeing or disagreeing with us as we kind of share through. But I love that part about where basically it says that the reflection needs to be kind of a continual process, right? Like it can't just be, okay, at the very end of the semester, I'm going to look at it and just say what went well and what didn't go well this semester. It's like, that's not really going to get you where you're trying to go. And so almost every day, like, again, these days it's a little harder, but I would often take like the car drive home to kind of think about things, to figure it out, look at those types of things. So that's something that maybe people can look at a bit here too. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about kind of our experiences, but I was going to share a different quote on reflecting on reflective practice by Linda Finlay. And this quote said, "In general, reflective practice is understood as the process of learning through and from experience toward gaining new insights of self and or practice. This often involves examining assumptions of everyday practice," and I really like that one there. It also tends to involve the individual practitioner in being self-aware and critically evaluating their own response to practice situations. The point is to recapture practice experiences and mull them over critically in order to gain new understandings and so improve future practice. This is understood as part of the process of lifelong learning. So I like this definition and kind of the way that she put together, the way of considering this and thinking about it, because it doesn't just kind of say, oh, just think about it, but it kind of says, hey, hold on a second. You have to be self-aware. You have to understand not only what you did, but how your reactions were to certain things, right? So like, why did I get upset about this? Or why did I make a change all of a sudden in the middle of this practice when, really it felt to me like the students were taking forever, but actually if I checked the clock, it was only 1 minute, something like that. And so I really like that idea of like kind of getting out of the headspace of reflection, which we'll talk about, and that is important, but also kind of moving into, I guess, the heart space of reflection as well there too.
Yeah.
So Ixchell, we're going to jump over and we're going to just talk a little bit. We're going to share just some of our thoughts on what we've been learning over the last couple of years since we started the show.
All right. So how have we evolved the last 2 years, personally, professionally? Shall I start?
Yeah, you start. I don't,
you've been doing podcasting for a while, so I don't know how you've evolved in terms of that, except that you've taken on more podcasting projects. And so you're You've just multiplied.
Yeah. But I think like when we talk about that, it's so for me, yes, podcasting has been a form of reflection, but I guess I'm going to let you share a little bit about what you think you've changed in the last couple of years. It could be specific or it could be kind of broader, but yeah, there are certainly changes. I mean, I hope that after 2 years of teaching it, anyone like is not still doing everything the exact same way, right? And especially over the last 2 years.
Yeah. So I just want to start I'm constantly thinking of how I've evolved as a podcaster. I mean, now I can say, yes, I'm a podcaster and own it. Where before, when I first started, I didn't really even have a voice. I didn't know what my co-host voice was, right? I know how to present in front of people. I know how to be a presenter. I didn't know how to be a podcaster. So I think that that's really helped my confidence. It's also helped me to pause and listen to what other people are saying, especially when we have guests, and think about how that applies to me as a professional, because yes, we're doing this for our audience as well, but there's always something that I can take away from our guests. And I don't know if that's something that you experienced in your early podcasting days, or I mean, I don't know what your experience has been there, but I see that now in my approach of listening to my colleagues, for example, I don't see myself as necessarily immediately needing to respond to them and give them a solution or give them my experience. It's more of like pause, listen, try to identify what need they have if they're coming to me for help or if they've got a frustration, and then see if you can lead them to a solution that they come up with rather than me throwing it out there. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly, because before I was so, I like to help people, but it feels good to, give them the solution and then hope that solution that you give them is what they take. Right. But that's not always what's needed. Sometimes they already have a sense of what a solution might be, whether it's in tech or an approach to a lesson plan or an approach to a student and meeting the student's needs. And they may already sort of know, but might need just, to have that drawn out as well. And then they've come up with it sort of. You just help them to connect to their, to their own expertise. Yeah,
that totally makes sense. I think sometimes, when we're dealing kind of as, if people look at us as some sort of experts in the field or using something, many times it's not exactly that they want to be told what to do. It's that they want to be reassured that what they are doing is
absolutely
okay,
right. Yes,
I think that's so. Recognizing that is a little bit of a different thing, right? Being able to be in that moment and recognize that they're just looking for validation rather than, and especially, there are people, it's always a little weird to me, but there are people that are like, oh, you're an expert on this. And like, I value your opinion on this. And then when you can just turn around and say like, you don't need my help for this. Like you already have this. I think it's, that can be empowering for people in a certain way as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's exactly what I was trying to get at. That personally, I feel I don't like necessarily being called the expert or the techie all the time, because then there are expectations that come with that title. And the thing is, I'm not an expert. I do like to troubleshoot and I do like to find solutions. And so that by nature makes me more knowledgeable on something. But the reality is that I also don't know. And this is why, I poke around and I ask colleagues or I ask you or I go to Twitter. But a lot of the times like you said, empowering others to help them, to just reassure them that, hey, you've also been doing this for a long time. And even if you haven't, you don't have to depend on someone else. You can find those avenues. And I think that is one thing that has shifted in the way I approach just the workplace in general, and podcasting has really helped because I have to shift, out of my own shoes and being like in front of the spotlight. It's not about me, right? It's about our audience.
Yeah, that's interesting. So one thing that's changed for me here is it's actually for me. I view it a little bit differently because when I'm podcasting, I kind of have to talk and present, right? And for me, I have to anticipate and answer the questions as we're going through the conversation, right? And so that to me is, it's something that I'm aware of, but I look at that, or I have, and I'm glad you said that, but I have always kind of looked at that as a little bit of a different way than maybe to the way that I teach or interact with people, because then I don't get that feedback directly. It's just like, here are all the assumptions of the things that these are the assumptions that I'm making, and I'm presenting them to you, as compared to the back and forth that we can get when we're working with other people. So I might maybe understand that a little, or process that in a little bit of a different way. But I really do think that has been valuable for me in interacting with people and teaching too. I realized this semester I'm getting better and better at, not great, but better at like using more kind of Socratic methods for student questions, because so many times this semester, especially with online, it's like there's so many questions of things that I already gave the answer to, right? And it's written down and all over the place, right? And so what I kind of caught myself doing, which is good, was responding positively to a student, but not giving them the answer, and saying, well, what do you understand of this? What did you read and what of what you read helps give the answer to that. So, right, putting that work back on the students so that they are considering and they're doing that reflection there in that moment and going, oh, actually, I already knew that. And hopefully the longer term results is that fewer questions come back because they recognize that the information is already out there and available for them. So that's kind of one way that I don't know. Do you think like that's different than from what you're saying?
Yeah, I think to a degree it's a little different for me, only because in the last year I've mostly been doing teacher training rather than working in the classroom. So I think that certainly my perspective has been influenced because of that. And I've been, working with teachers mostly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that can certainly be a change too, right? So that for you though, Ixchell, I would imagine there's just a ton of stuff that you learned through that process about, yourself, your future goals, what you're trying to get done, professionally, etc. So I'd be interested to hear a bit about that.
Well, number one, I always thought that I'd want to be a tech coach of some sort. And I still think that I would like to be in that role where you're coaching, you're actually working with someone over time. But I just missed working with students so much. And I think it's the coaching type of, I see myself as a coach when I'm in the classroom. I'm there encouraging my students. I'm not there to, try to catch them or trap them or make sure they, I'm not that type of instructor. So I really miss that interaction, even on Zoom, even when we were during the pandemic, we're still going through the pandemic, but even when we were teaching on Zoom, I just missed that exchange with other language learners. And I think part of it definitely is because I myself am a language learner, so I can to a degree still connect with my students in a different way that maybe native speakers can't, because they grew up learning English, so it's completely different. Even if you've learned another language, I just I think that's something that I've come to appreciate during the pandemic, that there were so many layers, and still are, because there's new layers of factors that are influencing our students, and how our students are coming and showing up in the classroom, whether it's virtual or face-to-face. Right now, the biggest thing on my mind is our Afghan refugees. There's just so much there that in the middle of a pandemic still, right?
Yeah.
So those kind of issues now, take precedence for me rather than can they pass the quiz on Friday? Are they better? I mean, yes, of course, that's my job. But there's that human factor. Are my students feeling safe in the classroom? Are they are they feeling like they can share what's going on at home, or at least that they're in a place for that moment and for that time that they're with me? Can they break away from whatever is keeping them to the best of their ability so that they can learn language, so that they can learn culture, etc. That's kind of where my perspective has shifted a lot. And I think it's because of the pandemic.
Yeah, for sure. So I think I mentioned, I can't remember if I did mention this. I think I did in a previous show where I talked about the idea that I'm going towards ungrading, right? And I've had, mixed feelings and kind of gone ups and downs with it. And I really love parts of it. And I'm also really kind of like stressed out and frustrated by other parts of it. And so this has been a super interesting experience, and I'm going to keep pushing forward with it for a couple semesters and see how I go with it and see how that goes. But kind of looking back on it, it's like the reasons and the reason that I would even be expected or, the reason that I was interested in this idea came from this pandemic learning, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm sitting there and I don't really have a direct, I have whatever level of relationship with you, but like, I'm just judging you on these numbers, right? And I'm like, I felt like started to feel like grades over all of these things are like basically just a judgment, right? And it's like good, bad, right? And as compared to this idea of like, showing me that you're working on skills, mastering those skills, building up, your abilities and all of those types of things. And so I think all of this came out of so much time just staring at screens and less time maybe interacting and kind of seeing how people and how human everybody is, right? And so I'm like, I want to get back to that humanity level. And so then I started processing through and trying to think of different ways to make that work and to make it be where I'm dealing with people and helping those students as people rather than as, a statistic to get through the system that's going to get an A or a B or a C or an F or whatever it is. And so that's been a big shift for me in terms of like how I'm dealing with students and how I'm understanding the relationship with students. And I'll be interested to hear your response on this too, Shell. One other thing that, I think you and I both love all of the work that like Denise Maduli-Williams are doing and Diane Mudra are doing all this online stuff. And they're like, I love online teaching, and they're super into it. And I'm like, I'm sitting there just for myself. I'm like, I enjoy certain parts of this. There are some parts that are amazing, but I love in-person teaching. I really, I am feeling personally, and again, I know this is shifting for different people, right? We're starting to see, we're starting to see teachers shifting towards like, I want to do more online teaching. And some of them are like, I want to do kind of a hybrid. And some of them are like, I'd want to go back completely in person, right? And they're recognizing where they kind of fit on that spectrum, I think, which is great because we want people in all of these different modalities and we want to have those skills. But I'm also realizing for myself how much I really do want that in-person experience. That kind of charges me up a little bit more than maybe the online experience personally. And so I'm still kind of trying to figure out what that means and what it's going to look like long term and, what students are going to want and all of those types of things. And I'm interested to hear what your thoughts on those shifts are. Because you've been in person, you've been back and forth,
tossed in and out, ping pong. Yeah, no, I think, and this is probably going to be, again, shifting as we continue and seeing what this pandemic and lessons that we think we've learned through the pandemic, what it brings. But I almost think now, because I do love the flexibility of what a proper online classroom gives you. But again, many of us were not given that support. We were just thrust into the digital world as as the pandemic hit us, and some of us were maybe better prepared to handle that stress because we were a little more knowledgeable and already had an inclination toward using technology. But that was still emergency teaching, really. Emergency distance teaching. And I think that if I were given maybe what Denise and Daya, who's a doctor now, Daya Mudra, if I were given that same setup, I would love to have a couple of days online and then 3 days, 3 days a week or something like that. Because I get energy from my students, and I love, I get many ideas from being there face to face. And that's exactly how I felt when I transitioned back to face. It's almost like, I was bogged down with the technology, bogged down by having to teach the same, it's the same topic for, as a TOEFL course for this many weeks. And then suddenly we met again for 6 weeks face to face, and it's like a brand new class. And yes, there were longer hours, and we didn't have the same breaks, and we had to constantly be in we were in a full class, a real classroom again. But the ideas that sparked from seeing the students, from listening to the students' conversations face to face without having to say, wait, I didn't hear what you said. Wait, hold on, your mic is muted. Wait, that constant pausing. And actually,
my symbol of just tapping my ear, like, you're muted, you're still muted.
Yeah. And and then also not having, when you suddenly everything isn't working, or you're not sharing the screen and having to say, oh, hold on, I've got to share my screen. It's constant interruption of your stream of thought and whatever is being shared. So you're not having that richness anymore. And then what I found is I was now being back at school, having to get up super early to avoid traffic and all of that. Became minimal. I didn't really care because I knew that at the end of the day, I would feel so creative that I'd have the energy to plan for the next day, and now have these great activities that actually my students ended up saying that was one of the best things that happened, was that we went back face to face, even though they knew they now had to come to class earlier, and their lunches maybe were a little shorter and always at the same time. Everything was synchronous. But a lot of the creativity came from them. Like my sparks came from them. So if it were a blend, I would love to have that with the proper setup.
I am piloting that for myself. Well, I think we're actually going back into school maybe in October. It seems like we're getting results like, hey, maybe it's going to happen. We're going to go back, which would mean I'll be piloting a class that will be meeting on Mondays in person and on Wednesdays online. Still synchronous for me, but it'll be interesting to see, because I think that'll be maybe a nice balance of the two. But as you were talking, Michelle, one of the things that I was recognizing, and I've thought about this in different ways, but I don't think I've quite put it together in the way that I started thinking, is like all of those little interruptions, right? Like, hey, you're muted. Can you answer a question? Are you there? Oh,
can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me? Oh, and then like straight up, like, you can see their screens are glitching in and out or whatever, or they can't get their connections, all of those things. So, when we talk about that in language form, we talk about that as code switching, right? And we say like, hey, every time you're doing code switching in your language back and forth, like there's value to it for sure, but also you're slowing yourself down in major ways, and it takes a long time to get your brain back into into the flow state. And so I'm wondering now, I think I've been out of flow for a year and a half.
I bet that with all, and again, you and I, we feel like we're pretty fortunate to troubleshoot, be easy. We have patience for troubleshooting. We kind of use our computers regularly, or we did before, and we know kind of how to get things to work. But it is draining in terms of energy, because you're spending energy on these other things that you normally wouldn't be doing. Like it's akin to you hear a little knock on the door in your classroom, right? And then you sort of pause. Did you hear that? You hear another little knock. Did you hear that? We hear was that you? Was that you? And so it disrupts the flow of things. And if your brain is constantly used to that, then you're not going to internalize things the same way. You're going to remember little snippets here and there, and maybe not in the same order. And it's also draining to have to recollect all that information, right?
Yeah, for sure. This is big to me right now. Like as we're so I'm glad we're reflecting on this, because I'm like, I'm realizing. So if I'm thinking about that for myself as the teacher who's preparing everything, right? And I've already got my information ready to go, you know, how the students then are also losing that flow, right? They're losing, you know, they've got their distractions, and each of them, you know, exponentially, so out every single house, and every single one of them that has a doorbell ringing or a kid running by or a dog barking or whatever else it is, right? All of those things are minor individual distractions, but also can pick up, and they can become class-wide distractions per person, depending on how many things might interact with that moment there too. So it's really just interesting.
And then just, you know, I'm fortunate enough that I have my students all day long, every single day for 5 days a week. So they get to learn my style, right? They get to learn my little quirks and my little whatever expectations I set or we set together, and routines that we have set. But then imagine the student who's somewhere else that's got 3 teachers a day. And now you're switching back and forth. And now that forces you to now get used to that personality and quirks online, which is much different than what it would be in a face-to-face classroom. So that is draining. That is tiring. And I've heard it from my students who switch from having the same teacher, they get used to me, then they go to someone else and have to get used to a completely new set of I keep calling them quirks because that's just behaviors or whatever it is online. But now imagine having to do that 3 times throughout the day, and maybe 4 times throughout the day. Like that's just so much energy. And then the teacher who might say, can you turn on your camera? Are you there? Are you there? And then you constantly have to reaffirm that you're there, either through voice or an emoji or, you know, waving or whatever it is. But that takes energy. Yeah. We don't have to do that face to face.
Yeah, that's just, it's fascinating. And again, it's not to discount the value of online learning. There's so much cool stuff, so much amazing stuff, but it's also like, okay, I think that maybe some of these things we never really thought about, or we took them for granted before when we were in person. And now it's like, oh, hold on a second. We see real value over here for these purposes. We see real value over there for those purposes, right? And so now I think we're really, and I mean, I'm truly saying we're in baby steps. We're just starting to get out of the rolling and getting into the baby crawl here of understanding what that true online teaching and experience might end up being. But it's really valuable to recognize what are the shortcomings of this side for this, and the upsides of that for this.
And I think, Brent, it's important again to emphasize that we're talking about emergency online teaching, right? This is definitely not the people who are set up with the platforms, with the equipment, because for the majority of us, we didn't have that. Think of our students who didn't have a Wi-Fi connection at home, or a stable Wi-Fi connection, and also devices with the same programs loaded onto it. So I know we've talked a lot about that, but it's important to reflect also about how that forces us to shift in our approach, because now we also recognize, or again, like you said, baby steps toward beginning to recognize that, hey, maybe this type of course does very well with very little prep. I don't want to say very little prep, but a fair amount of prep online. And let's shift that to online, because we also have learners who prefer that. It's better for their schedule, etc. And let's not, be so rigid. And I think that's the thing that has changed for me personally and professionally, is that rigidity. And I considered myself to be quite flexible before all of this with the pandemic, but I feel like now I'm even more in tune to just different energies and in the way that people approach anything, really. Mm-hmm. But I'm more also taking time to pause and decide, is this really, really important for me to try to control right now? What's the return on the investment? And is the world going to be okay if we don't worry about that right now? Right. Is my student going to be okay? Is it, do I have to mark them down for this thing because, oh my goodness, there's just a lot of that now to me is, I'm going to use the word trivial. there's just so much more now that I take time to pause before I react. And that's, again, personally and professionally.
Yeah. So I think we're still kind of in the middle of this all. It's like there's so much to wrap our heads around here and really understand, like so many awesome things have happened through the online teaching and through all of this. And then so many stressful things have happened at the same time. Right. So I think we're we're trying to sort all of that out and figure out, like, amongst all of these things, what are anomalies and what are going to be permanent changes, right? Like we're having these big conversations on campus about that, like what is the future of enrollment going to look like? What are students going to be asking for? What are they actually going to sign up for? These things are just so, it's like...
it's a movement, really, like a cultural shift, right? It's not, that's what I think of it now. It's like, it's a cultural shift in many areas.
Yeah. So to me, it's like, you're throwing out a bag of M&Ms and it's like, well, tell me where all the blue ones are. It's like, they're all over the place. I don't know where the blue ones are. They're somewhere. And I'll grab a couple of them and like, here they are. But like, there's still so much more. And like, I don't know. So there's just a lot to it, but I'm glad we had this talk. It's a little different thing, but it's a valuable way to kind of recognize, what's been happening and what we're trying to shift to and how, and then again, remember, we might change our thinking about this by episode 100.
Yeah. Well, but that's good, right? Because that's the only thing that's constant is change. And when we change, we know that we're alive. When we don't change, something has been set in stone and fossilized, and then pretty much, what happens, right? A fossil means you are dead and extinct, and you're doing things the way you used to do them because that's the way they used to do them. And I think that's just a good thing. It's good that we need to embrace that.
If your teaching has fossilized, that means you are dead. Isha Reyes.
Hey, I didn't come up with that term, okay? Fossilized. People laugh at me when I say, hey, that's a real language term.
They didn't. Wait, people laugh at you?
Yeah, they're like, why did it call him a fossil? That's horrible. It's like, well,
time to go
don't blame me.
Anything else to reflect on before we kind of shift out?
Well, my taste for coffee has not improved. I still get the cheapo
we'll talk about
coffee.
We'll keep working
and
on
anything on your end. My mic still.
Yes, let me reflect on how terrible your microphone is, and I don't know why you don't just buy the microphone that I told you to buy 2 years ago. It's still buzzing.
I still don't have a proper desk or proper recording area.
Well,
so some things I'm still doing them the way I used to do them. I haven't changed very much.
Yes, your podcast setup is fossilized for sure. All right, so these are some good shares, some good things, and I am looking forward to processing it all a bit more.
All right, it is time for our fun finds, and this time I have a book recommendation. Okay. It is called You Are the Placebo by Joe Dispenza. He's got several books out there. I don't know if you've heard of this one, but it was a recommend. I'm in a book club, and so this was the book. It's the book we're reading, and it's about shifting the way you think in order to. He talks a lot about healing and just I guess what we call the self-fulfilling prophecy. If you have negative thoughts, then you're going to change the chemistry of your body, and then that leads to maybe illness or a manifestation of something. And so it's pretty interesting. I don't know where I stand on the whole placebo effect, but it's because it talks about the brain and it's very much research based in terms of the brain. I'm interested. So it's a good a good read to have, just to have that information. So You Are the Placebo by Joe Dispenza.
Nice. So speaking of your terrible taste in coffee,
You've only changed to be snobbier.
yes,
Refined.
I'm moving up the snob ladder here, which is I got myself a belated self-birthday gift.
Oh, wow.
Of a coffee roaster. So I'm actually going to be roasting coffee beans at home.
Wait, what's a coffee roaster?
A coffee roaster is a machine that roasts your beans.
Like, so you buy the green
beans, yeah. So you buy green beans and you put it into the machine, and there's like all sorts of different ways to do this. So like obviously if you go to like a coffee roaster, like a shop that has their own roaster, right? You see that machine that spins all the beans and does all that stuff. It's cooking.
You are moving up the coffee snob ladder.
Yeah. So I got this one called the Boca Boca coffee roaster. It's made in Korea. And the way that it works is a lot of these ones work. You put it on a little like a camper propane flame, and so you run it through a little barrel on top of that. But this one is all infrared. It's all heat, like light based heat, and so you just plug it in and it'll rotate the beans. It's a little tiny canister. It's like it says 250 grams. I'm gonna not risk that much to be totally full, but you just roast a little bit at a time, and so you can maybe get a few cups worth out of it, like not cups, sorry, like a few pots out of it in a single roast. And so I have the machine, and I am waiting for my first round of green beans to come in the mail. And so
that is so cool. That's like one step below brewing your own beer.
It's one step above brewing my own beer. I've brewed my own beer before, not very successfully.
Of course you have.
I've tried. Well, it's hard. Brewing your own beer is actually its own challenge because temperature. Well, I tried to do it when I was living in Japan.
I helped someone brew beer, so by association, I'm a little bit knowledgeable.
Yeah. It's a interesting, fun process. I'd like to try it here. Yeah, it is tricky. There's a lot to it. This is actually, ultimately, this depending on how nerdy you get about it. But just to start, I'm just roasting and seeing how it tastes.
So a year from now, we'll be
diesel beans.
We'll be able to you will be able to purchase your own diesel pod.
Yeah. Oh, diesel pod. Oh, there you go. Jeez.
The pod.
The pod. Diesel pods. Yeah. So if anybody is really interested, let's wait a little while to see how it turns out. But I'm looking forward to it. It should be a fun little thing, and it only takes about 10 to 15 minutes to roast a little batch. So we'll see how that goes.
That's cool. Thank you so much for listening to the show, especially
50!
For listening. Hopefully,
thank you so much for anyone who listened to 50 shows.
Yeah, if you've listened to all those episodes, that's pretty cool. That deserves a little digital badge. Anyhow, you could win a one-of-a-kind diesel pin by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're giving us a shout out any other way, tag us on social media. We are on all the platforms.
Yes. Hey, let's do this. I'm going to make a digital badge and put it on the show notes here. And if you say that you've listened to all 50 episodes, you can go download it and share it out on the internet, or print it out and put it up on your refrigerator, whatever you like to do. I'm going to go make that little badge. So we are on Patreon if you want to support the show. 50 episodes of shows. If you have gone back and listened to everything, if you find that that's been valuable and you feel like you want to support us, that'd be awesome. If you feel like, hey, I don't want to support you, but I want to keep on listening, that is totally awesome too. So we are on Patreon. You can find the links on the Diesel page. We also have show notes for this episode. So if you want that digital badge, go to diesel.org/50, the number. And of course, you can listen to us on Voice Ed Canada as well. Find us on Twitter. We're at DieselPod. And I am at Brent G. Warner.
And I'm Michelle at Ixy_Pixie. That's IXY_PIXY.
Okay, and Ixchell, for this last one, Armenian. So I found a little video that I'm going to put this into the show notes as well. This little video, this YouTube video of how hard it is to say thank you in Armenian. but give me a second. I'm going to practice one more time and listen. So let me see. Hold on. In Armenian, thank you is Snorakalyutsun. Snorakalyutsun for tuning in to the DIESOL podcast.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.